Hey guys, how's it going? Michael Troy here. I am so excited today for this comic chat. We are talking to Aubrey Sitterson, the author and creator of the hot new comic from Image, Free Planet, that came out next last week and is exploding all over the internet. So exciting. Very happy to have Aubrey here today. So thank you for joining me. How you doing today?
Of course, man. I'm stoked. Thank you for having me. I think we got connected because you not so it was a very nice, it was a very generous and kind and glowing even review of Free Planet that you did on your channel. But more importantly than that, even it was engaged, man. And I was like, this is some creators don't like to read or listen to reviews, and I ain't one of them. I want to know, that's what I want. I want people to engage with the work in the way that you did to a T, man. So thank you, not just for having me, but for being willing to dig into what is, I think, a somewhat more complex and maybe more challenging and definitely more time intensive comic than is you normally find on the racks these days. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And yes, we will definitely get into that. But it is like I said in my review, when I picked up the book, um, I feel like part of my angle when I review newer books is like to scoop and, get the first review out as quick as possible. But then, like I said, when I opened the book, I was like, oh, this deserves my time and attention. You can see how dense it is. You can, without reading it, you can immediately see all the attention to detail and love and thought that went into like every single page. So I had to wait until, God forbid I should take a minute to sit down and drink in every word and every page and really enjoy a comic book. So, mission accomplished, you know what
Hell
I
yeah.
mean?
Hell
It's like
yeah.
you're sort of, it feels like there's a mantra or sort of like a mandate going along or a movement, as I think you're calling it, with what you're trying to do with Free Planet here. And so I think it's working. You know
Well,
what I
thank you,
mean?
brother. I appreciate that. It's been really nice to hear, people when they read it, whether they're doing these podcasts or talking to people at my local shop or at signings and all. One of the things people say is, oh, it's so dense, but not in a bad way. Like they rush to correct themselves because dense comics have become and have been for many years something that we kind of recoil from. And um, you know, I know myself, I certainly did. My previous work accepting I did a wrestling nonfiction graphic novel that's very heavy on captions, but my other work, my fiction work has always been really breezy, and it's always been um I tried to really center the visuals. But I think I was leaving some of the tools in the box, man, because text is a part of comics. And it's not just that text and visuals combine to make comics, but the presentation of text and the way that text fits on the page, whether it's a sound effect or whether it's a big chunky caption, that is a visual component of a visual medium. And it should be utilized. And it's been a real treat for me. It's been a joy, honestly, to hear people say things like, "Oh, I thought I would read this real quick before bed the other night." And I got a couple pages in and had to put it down because I couldn't get into it, right? Or I read this thing over the course of a week. That is a joy to me because it means that people are actually taking the time to dig into what we've presented for them.
Yeah, it's very interesting listening to you talk because it's setting off so many thoughts in my brain. I feel like you're really honoring or it's a return to form as far as comic books go. I've been reviewing and really enjoying a lot of facsimile reprints from the Silver Age, and they are dense, man. Have so many words that would make Chris Claremont blush, and it is like definitely something you have to sit down and enjoy. But I think there was some sort of shift in comic books where they wanted to become really cinematic and they wanted
Yeah.
to eliminate captions. They wanted to eliminate thought balloons. They wanted to eliminate sound effects to make it look more cinematic. However, it's
Well,
like
yeah.
you're cutting off your hand in a way. It's like you're eliminating a lot of the, I call them tropes, but I mean that in an affectionate way, that make comics so great.
Yeah,
So it's like
absolutely. they're quirks of
to
the genre, or not the genre, the medium, right? They're aspects of the medium that, you know, limitate it gets it's kind of a gray area, right, between a strength and a limitation in this regard. Just because you're not talking about it's not either. It's just a peculiarity of the medium and what it can do and what it cannot do. And no, I think you're absolutely right. It has been this trend, and like all trends, it starts and very, very exciting. And dude, this is not me knocking that style of comics, and I can say that with great surety because I just recently reread Planetary, and it rips. It still rips. And that's a book that is so far at the other end of the spectrum from Free Planet. There's a 8-page sequence. Damn near 40% of the book is used to show a spaceship landing quietly, right? And it's Warren Ellis and it's John Cassaday, and it works, man. But that came out some time ago. And
yeah.
we've had a lot of stuff influenced by that. And so it's a treat for me to uh I'm proud, honestly. I'm proud to try and dig up some of this kind of like alternative path. And I'll be honest with you, it's I was talking with a friend of mine today about it. And I know this sounds incredibly hyperbolic, but I think that Howard Chaykin is kind of like an abandoned evolutionary path of comics. And what, very much defines the Free Planet approach. And this goes down to, Howard being my beloved uncle. He's my beloved uncle. He is my co-creator, Jed Doherty's. He formerly worked for him as an assistant. And but even beyond that, we are very much trying to pick up on this thread that Howard started pulling at in the late 70s and early 80s in terms of approaching comics as graphic design and utilizing all these things not for the ordering of like the breaking of a narrative into panels and the placing of them in order, but the presentation of these pages, right? Such that when you turn the page, you are confronted by something nigh overwhelming and something that incentivizes readers to actually dig in and spend some time with it. So, absolutely, I spend a lot of time, most of my comics reading diet, I read contemporary comics, but most of my comics reading diet is older material because I'm trying to dig into approaches that have fallen out of vogue and things that work with the medium, but that people haven't been doing that I can hopefully kind of dust off and incorporate into what we're doing in Free Planet.
It's funny because I feel like I started reading comics in the 80s, like or the early 80s. So I'm more of like a Bronze Age kind of person or whatever. So this is my first foray into the Silver Age, really. And it's so exciting for me because it's like I feel like I'm reading and experiencing what inspired the people who made comics that I love
That's so
were
cool.
inspired by. And I see a lot of that happening now because I feel like people with maybe you might be included in this, but a lot of creators in our circles and stuff were definitely influenced by the comics of the 90s and
Of
the
course.
Image comics. And so it's kind of like very fun to see like the different, genres and different eras of comics and how they all kind of tie into each other and the evolution of it. You know what I mean? It's like,
It's one of my favorite things, this kind of genre archaeology, whether it's in comics or sci-fi or fantasy fiction, you know, going back and reading that foundational material, you it's a little counterintuitive, right? Because like I would assume old Aubrey used to assume like, if that old stuff's not hold up the same way the
mm-hmm,
new stuff does, because
mm-hmm.
it's not made for me. It's not made for it was made for an older audience. They had different expectations. We're living, we want fast cuts. We want quick, quick changes and modern styles doing things. But if you have a real love for and fondness for the genre and or the medium that you're discussing, like the relevant one, then I think that there's so much to be learned, and it creates additional ways to appreciate things if you know what they're pulling from, if you know what they're riffing on, if you know what they're building on, you can appreciate a piece of work not just in and of itself, but as a part of this overarching conversation, right? And that's the canon, right? That's the when people talk about, like the cultural conversation around a medium or a genre, like at its best, that's what it is, right? It's people reacting to and building on and sometimes tearing down what came before them, but it's all reaction. It's all part of that conversation. So I love that you're picking up on that.
Yeah, and it's funny because the reality is, not only does it hold up, it's so much better. I mean, those early
You're
issues
talking
of
about the
Fantastic.
You're talking about the Silver Age stuff?
Yes. Yeah, like it's just like the Fantastic Four is so much quirkier and stranger than I realized. And I'm just like, wow, this is like so imaginative. So, you know, and it's what they were getting at the time. So I can imagine, like, it's just you
Well,
can
and
see why Marvel
you get
gained
to watch
such
them figure it
popular.
out. You get
Hmm.
to watch in real time as they explore and figure out this thing, which again, if you are a, if you're a comics tourist, right? If you're just like, maybe I read a comic once or twice a year, right? At most, right? Right. I read a big graphic novel when it like bubbles up into like mainstream appreciation. Like, yeah, you're probably not gonna like going back and digging through early Fantastic Four, but that's not us, man. We're we're comic book people. We've got the
Right.
brain disease. So
Hmm.
like it's yes, we've got the brain disease. You agreed with me instantly. But we do, and if you have that, then going back and watching Stan Lee and Jack Kirby figure out how to do this new subgenre of superheroes that had not really existed before. You can see the antecedents, but not in the way that Fantastic Four did. Watching them figure it out, what a treat. Like what incredible things can be learned from identifying the stuff that Jack Kirby realized while he was working on Fantastic Four that he should be doing differently. What an amazing thing.
Yes, I know. Comics are an amazing thing, aren't they?
They're my favorite. They're my favorite thing, Michael. My
What
absolute favorite.
like what drew you into comics? What comics were you reading as a kid, and what sparked your?
I was a newspaper strip kid.
Yeah.
I and it was mostly because that's what I had access to. I liked superhero comics. They just weren't around as much.
Hmm.
I remember I had a subscription to Chuck Dixon, Tom Grummett, Robin.
Hmm.
I was really into Tim Drake Robin, and
Yeah.
like that was like my one comic book, but I was frequently frustrated by all the crossovers. I never knew what was going on, but primarily comic strip. That was where I started, and my all-time favorite comic strip is, I mean, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say Bloom County slash Outland because they connect. It's both Burke Breathed. That's my all-time favorite comic strip. I adore it. I still have all my old collections when I was a kid, and I pull them out and read through them and cackle at them. I think they're hysterical.
You're gonna laugh when I tell you this. My brother was like a huge Bloom County fan, and
Cool.
I absolutely adored the art, but I never read it because I always thought it was so text heavy and
It's
like
pretty tech savvy.
I know that sounds awful for like I feel like I retroactively like must have had ADD or something because I always like the way I learned to read comics. I would read the speech balloons and never the captions, but it taught me
Oh,
how to read.
interesting. Oh,
And
interesting. But
then
you'd skip the
event
captions.
I always skip the captions, like just trying to have to figure it out. And of course, I'm only like 4 or 5 years old, but eventually would graduate to the captions. But another plus for comics,
Yeah, man.
teaching kids how to read. But
Burke Breathed was the start, and then from there it was, I liked all Calvin and Hobbes, of course, was a big one. And then I found my local library had Tintin volumes. So Tintin was a really big early comics influence for me as well.
was it how much of it was? And it's funny because I see you just posted something about like the marriage of art and words and comic storytelling. And so for you, especially as a writer now, because I find a lot of comic writers started out wanting to draw. Was it the art for you? Was it the story? Was it both? Or
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I drew as a kid. I didn't um I try and catch myself not to say that, I didn't have any talent for it. Because like, no, you have to work for that, right? I mean, but it really was, it just didn't click for me. I didn't find it fun. I found it frustrating because I wasn't better at it and I didn't want to work at it. Wah, wah. So no, like I liked drawing, but I just didn't pursue it. I didn't get good enough. And like a lot of people, I kind of fell out of comics for a good long while. And I fell back in head over heels when I went to New York City for school when I was 18, and there's just so many comic shops. And then all of a sudden I just had access to all this stuff that I didn't have before. But yeah, I had always I view, I loved the art of I loved comics and I love the art of them, but my home base was novels in terms of like other media, right? And this is the thing that I'm thinking about a lot in light of the conversation we started with, right? This trend towards like the cinematic paced comic stories or ones that kind of mirror teleplays a little bit more. They've been very in vogue for quite some time, about 2 decades now. And it never really clicked with me. And I didn't really understand why until recently when I was thinking about the fact that when I was a kid, I never like harbored ambitions of writing teleplays or screenplays. I didn't even think about that stuff, but I adored novels. I devoured novels. And so I think the binary distinction between text and visuals in comics is a false and misleading one, right? And I think they are two different components, but they're components of one thing. They're not two elements at odds with one another, and I think that's maybe sounds pedantic, but I think is a important yet subtle distinction. And to that end, like my approach has all especially on Free Planet, is to create something that works like literature, to create something that works like novels, not necessarily in the amount of text, although there is a lot of text in Free Planet, but rather in the way that the narrative functions to explore themes and ideas through the presentation of the medium, which is inclusive of words and text, words and visuals, right? So that's like, I don't know, that's been like a recent, very exciting realization for me. It was like, oh yeah, like I wasn't like I watched a lot of TV, but like, my favorite medium for stories was novels always. And so it kind of things have kind of slid into place there for me recently, which is why I'm so excited about it.
It's funny because as an artist and I'm always like focused on the art. And like if I were doing like a portfolio review or something, one of the like rules for an artist, but is to be able to tell a story without words. Like if you take away the words, then the story should be able to be told without it. And while that may be true, especially reading, it's like Stanley's so controversial, his contribution to, whatever people argue about his contribution versus Jack's contribution and stuff. But if you take away Stan's like flowery, like zippy dialogue, it's just not as much fun. You know what I mean? There's just something so charming and just like so alluring and really helps draw you into that fantastical world
Totally.
that wouldn't happen without the words. So
No, I mean it's crucial. Yeah, I mean I will interject. I mean this I don't disagree with you, but I feel like I must. I'll go to
please.
bat for Kirby's dialogue. I will go to bat every day, twice on Sunday for Jack Kirby dialogue. I think it's better than Stan's. I think Kirby fourth world dialogue, it does all the stuff that's like people talk about Stan's dialogue doing, but like hyper concentrated. I adore it. You're right though. Like your larger point, I just love Kirby dialogue so much. I needed to say something. You're right though that you know text isn't, I'm guilty of this too, right? My previous books, I didn't realize I was doing it. I was absolutely ideating them and thinking about them in terms of the way that you would a screenplay or a teleplay, right? I would think about it as narrative that then you try and place into this. Like it's relevant to the advice that you've heard that people say of like, oh, you should be able to tell your story completely visually, right? And that works if what you're modeling yourself after is a teleplay or a screenplay. right? Where you're just showing this action. And so everything should be shown through the artwork of everything happening. A spaceship's landing. Well, we want to be accurate, so we need 6 pages of this thing lower it down, right? Just because you need to show it. And that is certainly a way of writing comics. It's very popular. And there's a lot of books like that. But the thing that I kind of realized that's at odds with that specific piece of advice is you can and should use text for things. There are some things that are more efficient to just communicate through text, and you can keep the visuals focused on the stuff that you actually not just that people want to see, but the stuff that's rewarding to see, the stuff that will allow readers to glean information and develop impressions and ideas about things in ways that text would not, because art opens up the door for more ambiguity and interpretation, right? So save the art for that. And that becomes the task, right? It's, horses for courses, right? Let words do what they're best at. Let images do what they're best at, and design the page in such a way that all of it can fit together into one singularly beautiful art object, right? And to do that for every page, like that's the trick. And there's, you look outside of, especially you look outside of, like, honestly, just look at US comics in the 90s, right? Like anytime before the 2000s and any other comics tradition, you can see people doing this, right? In really kind of somewhat shocking ways sometimes. I'm reading it's the history of the Trigon Empire, and it's this old like 1960s um British kids comic about this other planet, and it's like this long history of like complicated like kingdoms and wars and technological advances, and it is so text heavy, and they'll just have big blocks of text and it'll explain something to you, and then there'll be one image of like a scene and like one back and forth dialogue, and then it'll be another scene explaining something else to you, all on the same page. And it's alarming to come at that from a contemporary US comics perspective, where, you know, if you're depicting a town, you're not just doing one establishing shot, you're zooming in on it, right? Or like, you're showing different aspects of it like multiple times with maybe a little bit of dialogue or like a caption or something. It's a Yeah, I don't know. I forgot what Michael, I got all excited to you about
It's
the
okay.
Trigon Empire.
Tangents are just
And I don't
fine.
remember what was the question. What are we talking about?
I don't know, but that is totally fine. One question leads to another conversation all the
Listen, man,
time.
you put a coin in me and I'll go. You got to rein me in.
I did want to clarify really quickly, just for anyone who is shook and gasping. I was not saying anything against Kirby's dialogue.
Of course not.
I realized that I've never read it before. I've yet to crack the New Gods code. I'm reading the New Gods series, and like the whole time I'm sitting there
Wait, you're
reading it,
reading the new Gods, like the
the
current?
New Gods,
Okay,
yes,
got it. The
and I
current
read the
one.
John Burns, Jack Kirby Fourth World too. I'm such a retroactive Kirby fan. Like this
Bro,
is
you
like
got to read Fourth World. Fourth World is
it
something else. It's
it
special. It's a special.
it's
It is a special thing, and it does what we're talking about too, in that it functions in a fundamentally different way, and it's why people sometimes don't like it, and it's why people sometimes struggle with Kirby's approach on that 70s DC stuff, which is my favorite Kirby. It's some of my favorite comics, period, because it is, especially Fourth World does it the most and best. It's people screaming ideas at each other. It's just making the subtext text, and everything is high drama opera, right? Like everything is just amped up to the 11th degree. It's beyond amp. It is, I don't know, it's something else. It's surreal. It's surreal in like the true original sense of the word, meaning like extra real. It's more vibrant and more true than reality actually is. That's how I feel about Kirby's Fifth World.
well,
Hardest possible
I don't need a
recommendation.
better, and I was going to say I don't need a better endorsement than
I
that.
turn into Kermit when I start talking about Kirby's Fourth World.
So I want to steer the conversation back to the reason we're here today
Yes.
to celebrate the release of Free Planet. You must be so excited, so proud.
Bro, I'm mega stoked.
How did this come about? What was the inspiration? Uh, how did you meet your collaborators,
Mhm.
get the team together, and what road led to the Free Planet? And if you want to throw in like the little elevator pitch to tell us what it's
Yeah,
about as well.
for sure. So Free Planet is a geopolitical space opera. It's co-created by myself and Jed Doherty. He did all the art on it. It is about the first completely free planet in human history. They've just won their revolution. It was a grueling 3-year battle against a corporate dominated oligarchy with tendrils stretching about the galaxy. Their planet is the only place that you can find a uniquely potent energy source, which has ensured their independence, but also made them a target of multiple galactic empires. The only people defending the planet and the Freedom Guard. They're all revolutionary heroes. They fought in the war. They're deeply committed to the dream of a free planet. But, Michael, just like everybody in this great nation of ours, they all have completely different ideas about what complete freedom actually entails. And that's what drives all the drama, all of the geopolitical maneuvering, all of the big sci-fi action, and all of the interpersonal drama between these revolutionary heroes stuck on a satellite together trying to figure out what freedom actually is. It Jed and I met many years ago through my uncle Howard Shaken when he was working his assistant, one of his assistants, doing background stuff and in Photoshop textures and cleaning up pages and all. We kept in touch. We did a book at Dark Horse in 2021 called Savage Hearts. It is a romantic, it's a romantasy, right? It's a fantasy romance, but it's a rom-com between a big buff barbarian babe and a lithe, weird little beast man. After, as Savage Hearts was coming to its conclusion, and so this is back in like 2021, 2022. Free Planet's been in the works for a long time. Jed and I started talking about what we are going to do next, and we both agreed that we wanted to do something more serious. We wanted to do something that would be taken seriously. We both love genre. We both love doing wacky, fun, silly stuff like Savage Hearts was. But we also recognize, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I recognize that I was doing what was easy and fun for me to write, and I was proud of the work, and I was doing the best that I could with the work, given the parameters that I had set for myself. But I wasn't really striving for the type of work that excited me most as a reader. And that was an upsetting thing for me to, to realize. And so I went up on my mountain and I got to work. Both, figuring out this new approach, which includes here's a little sneak peek. Nobody's seen these before, except for
Ooh,
I haven't.
exclusive, y'all.
Is this the right one? Yes. I do thumbnails now. This is for issue 7. This is only some of them. I've got more here and more here because I do multiple versions of them. I do that before I script. I used to draw thumbnails when I was unsure if a page would work. So I
Hmm.
would after I scripted. Now I do it before I script, and that's crucial because it forces me to, instead of just taking the narrative and breaking it into the panels,
Hmm.
it forces me to come up with a series of mostly spreads. It's a ton of spreads in the book, and that was crucial in figuring out how to do that and how to approach it. And also, a massive part of the book was research, because it started with me thinking about space Venezuela, truthfully. It started with me thinking of Venezuela and how interesting and sad Venezuela is. And this idea of, especially like Chavez era Venezuela, when there was this like um, this sense that he's bucking the world order, right? Like he's carving out his own path, and it's similar to Cuba, right? Like in terms of like really trying to stake out a claim for itself, even though allied with the USSR, still maintaining levels of autonomy and trying to exist as its own independent state. This is fascinating to me. I wanted to explore that, but I Also, man, it's still comics. I wanted lasers. I wanted spaceships. I also wanted the freedom to not be beholden to real world events, right? That, and it's not an issue of not wanting to do research because I've done extensive research. Big, like, oh, look, I got another one. So this one I've read. This was one of the most influential books I did. It's Spanish Civil War by Hugh Thomas. I'm going through this one for the second time right now because it was so helpful and kind of thinking about the world of Lutheria. But no, I've got a big bibliography on my Substack. People can check it out. And I go through them on my newsletter and talking about what I kind of gleaned from each and the impact they had. But I wanted to do all that research and to make it feel real. So I could understand these big issues and like these big complexities around something that sounds so simple as what is freedom, right? I
Hmm.
knew that I needed that historical context in order to be able to write this thing in such a way that it feels real and it actually means something and not just Frankenstein monster of tropes from other sci-fi media, I've assumed, right? I wanted to root it in something more real than that. But the other reason I thought it was really important for us to just do a sci-fi thing and to set it, million like untold millions of years in the future, just outrageously far in the future, was for us to divorce it from the incredibly contentious, complex, and heated contemporary political um, landscape and ecosystem, right? I don't, my politics are my politics, and you might be able to you might think you know what they are from reading some of my work. You might have a pretty good idea, but I didn't want to make something that was propaganda. I didn't even want to make direct metaphor because that kind of stuff, you know, it stokes your audience. It stokes your like specific demo and they like reading it. But it doesn't catalyze thought. It doesn't force people to think about things and kind of interrogate their own beliefs and explore these big ideas. In order to do that, you need complexity, you need ambiguity. And, if we'd said it in Venezuela, if we'd said it in Cuba, if we'd said it during the US Revolution, right? If we'd done the Russian Revolution, any of these real world things, people would have come to it with preconceived notions about who's in the right, who's in the wrong, what was a historical, a historical crime, what is, unfairly painted as one. Everybody have opinions about that. But by divorcing it from that, by mixing things up, by separating it out from real world conceptions of what different people like the suite of acceptable political opinions for an individual person to have and the types of buckets that we put people in by placing it so far in the future in this very different, very alien though familiar landscape. We can have these characters that are a little bit more complex than say, oh well, that's the big city liberal and that's the rural conservative guy.
I think one thing that you have on your side is that no matter how many civilizations rise and fall, no matter how much many things humanity or civilizations go through, they're still always going to have the same petty grievances and differences and themes and stuff to work out. So yeah, you can approach it from an allegorical kind of way, and that is a great way to do it. But what a complicated way to do it! I can't even imagine the work that goes into creating like this universe. And I see your notes on just one page and it's like I can't even imagine the Bible for this. How do you keep track of it? Or
I've got a bunch of documents. Some of them are most so this do thumbnails and I do notes and stuff, like my notes, like I'll print out outlines and I'll do like notes on those. Like I do that by hand and I do like, journaling by hand. But when it comes time to kind of solidify things, I have separate documents. I have dossiers for each of the characters. There's a huge cast. So I have dossiers for each of them that include, what they did during the Revolutionary War, who they are, where they come from, like demographic information, and the most crucial part, where their friction points are with other characters, right? In
Mhm.
terms of four big things, uh, freedom, the sacrifices it requires, the discipline required to maintain freedom and the authority that rises in its absence, right? These are four components of any society with any level of freedom. And, they're sliders, right? In terms of like how much freedom do you really need? And what are you willing to sacrifice? And how much discipline do you have, right? Like what kind of authority will you put up with, right? And asking those four questions of all of my characters and thinking about how they'd answer them and thinking about where they would disagree with other people, whether it's about religion or the usage of natural resources or indigenous rights or the complexities of trade relations with this giant alliance. Any and all of this stuff is up for debate, because they're trying to build a new world and they're trying to figure out the best way forward for everybody. And I have extensive documents about all of that, as well as kind of like galactic history, the stuff that hasn't come up in the book, and I don't really plan for it to come up, but I need to have it written down, especially in terms of dates and timelines, such that I don't ever contradict myself because I don't want to get caught.
Um, so it's to use some of your words, I guess I guess you could call it maybe a geopolitical sci-fi story, but it also kind of reads, in my opinion, and because that appeals to me, like a superhero comic book, because we have the Freedom Guard. So obviously that sounds like a superhero name, and they have what I kind of feel would be like modernized, sort of like less cheesy superhero comic books. You know what I mean? Or superhero costumes. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. So, it's comics. You can't escape, especially with US direct market comics, you cannot escape superheroes, right?
hmm
And even books that here's a good example. I just read Exquisite Corpse last night, which was great. Um,
yeah, it was good. I've
it's good.
already
It's a horror comic, but it's a superhero comic.
for
But
sure.
the superheroes are all serial killers fighting each other in a town. That's not a spoiler. That's in all the solicits. It's fine for
No,
me to say.
I know.
But each, there's 13 of them and each of them are a superhero. They've each got their costume, they've each got their look. So, part of it is utilizing, and again, being part of utilizing the medium and being part of this conversation, right? It would be disingenuous for me to act like superheroes, especially specifically like go to space opera, man, specifically Claremont. It would be disingenuous for me to act like Claremont is not a huge part of my creative DNA. And like it's there. I think it's all there on the page. I don't think like Kirkman gave us a great blur and he called it out because he spotted it immediately. So yeah, there are kind of these superhero visual elements, but it's a funny thing. It's an interesting thing to think about. It's like, okay, yeah, I agree. That big spread of the team, it does feel like a superhero thing. But is it because something intrinsic to what we've done there, or is it just because it's in a comic book? And when you turn the page and you see a big spread of people and they're all uniquely designed, because you're right, they do have kind of superhero costumes, but here's another way to look at it. Uniforms. They're a military battalion. They have uniforms and they have these jackets that some of them choose to wear. Some of them are in more traditional type uniforms. It's, they're a military unit, but also kind of superhero-y. And I think
Well, I mean,
that's a fun thing to think about, honestly, I think.
yeah, in my review, I did compare it to Claremont's X-Men, and the greatest compliment ever, because I mean, it's he really did shape like comics a lot. I mean,
He did.
he definitely
Are you ready for a book
created,
claim? Are you ready for a bold claim, Michael?
yeah,
I think Claremont's more influential than Alan Moore.
oh, 100%. Like,
I would rather read Alan. I would rather read Abby. Actually, that's a hard thing to say. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. Alan Moore's great. Alan Moore is brilliant, and he did very different things. But in terms of wide-reaching influence, it's impossible to overstate how important Claremont's approach, not just to X-Men, not just to superhero teams, but to writing comics for the direct market audience and especially teams, especially the X-Men. It's massive. And the funny thing about Alan Moore and Claremont, a lot of the stuff that Alan Moore is kind of like people jokingly talk about like his obsession with um like mystical magical traditions. Claremont was doing before he was. Claremont was like putting weird Kabbalah stuff into Uncanny X-Men years before Alan Moore was doing any of that stuff. And it's not to say it's not to run down Alan Moore. It's to elevate Chris Claremont and how monstrously important I think he is.
Yeah, sometimes there are. I know it's like when you reread some of the old X-Men and stuff, there are sometimes your eyebrow goes up and you're like, what? Like, how did I not notice that before? Or something like that. But, it was his
All the
playground. He had,
BDSM stuff, man, all the Hellfire
I know
Gala
that
stuff,
is so
or Hellfire
crazy.
Club stuff. That's the thing.
I,
It's a lot of the stuff that people, have. I think Alan Moore deserves an immense amount of credit, but I think sometimes it's a little bit much in terms of like, oh, Alan Moore was the first one to bring, you know, um, non-mainline sex into comic books. No, no, sir. No, sir. Chris Claremont was getting Claremont Chris Claremont was getting off the beaten path horny for many years prior to Alan Moore. Many, many years.
that is so funny. It does seem like there was, and there had to have been like one. How many team members are there? One, two, three,
I don't
four,
even know.
five, six, seven, eight. Like about nine, I think.
And we
Um,
introduced a new character in issue 2 and then another one in issue 3.
and I love what is my Keen Surux, the guy with
Keen
the
Sirocco, yeah.
Sirocco. Yeah, they're just very cool designs, very fun. You have a lot of current themes, like it feels like AI is sort of an issue here, sex with robots, maybe. Um, things that are sort of in the ether right now and timely. I mean, of course, you do run into the problem of like Black Mirror. Hopefully, technology doesn't overlap and get ahead of you and the
Yeah, man.
storytelling.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. We cover a lot of ground. I mean, and it's part of that is, wanting to have this dense, complex, rich literary approach. I mean, and the other part of it too, truthfully, is this is my first image book. It's a big deal for me, and I want it to have everything. And like when I was up on my mountain thinking about what's the next thing, right? I did a I did a run of Dark Horse books and I did a bunch of Kickstarters and everybody liked them and they're well received and I'm very proud of them and I'm blessed with the artists that I got to work with. But I did spend a lot of time thinking about you know, what is the thing that I want to see and what's different and what's new and what is not, what doesn't exist right now and what is like my ideal comic. And what I landed on was something that utilized the medium to its utmost, that demanded attention, was enveloping, that was complex, that you might need to reread things, that you're going to want to go back and look at previous issues, that you're going to compare things because there's recurrence and there are repeated themes and there are things that you're not going to necessarily get on the first time around. That's the type of book that I want. That's the type of comic that I want to read. Something that not that I just kind of flip through half paying attention, but that I need to study, that I need to sit down, like have focused, quiet reading time with, right? That rewards
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And for me, an essential component of that and wanting this to be kind of a flex, honestly, right? There's some bitterness there and some resentment just in terms of, you know, I thought the work I was doing was really good. It wasn't getting the reception that I wanted it to. So, all right, fine. I'll show you. Let me show you. Let me show you what I can fucking do. And that is inclusive of jamming it packed with visual information, right? Inclusive of text and
Mm-hmm.
inclusive of all these different aspects and 9 or 10 characters and 18 conversations going on in every issue and laser battles and spaceship dogfights, the whole thing. Like that is part of the thesis statement of Free Planet is more. It's just more of everything. It's all of it jam packed together.
So how was the process? Did you said this is your first image book, so you send a blind submission and And I have to say, because I glazed over it a couple of times, and I don't think it registered until I saw you drinking out of the American flag glass. But
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Howard Chaykin is really your uncle.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, on my mother's side.
So I guess apparently having Howard Chaykin as an uncle doesn't guarantee you
No.
a
Well, I mean,
book
I've
at
been banging on
Image.
that. I've been banging on Stevenson's door since like for longer than I care to admit in a public forum. For ages, I've been going to look at Image, and you know, um, it's Image is it's based on Eric's taste. Eric's taste are what created the work of the creators there, right? But the reason that the creators there were there, right? The image of Image, right? The
Right.
brand, right?
Hmm.
What Image means now, right? Is because of Eric Stevenson, and it's because of those choices. And cannot I cannot presume to tell you what that guy's looking for. If I knew, I probably would
Right.
have had an Image book sooner. I don't know. But I know with Free Planet, I sent so I we got it together, we got the pitch together, and I sent it to Robert Kirkman, who is not my uncle, but I have known Robert for a very long time because I used to edit him at Marvel, and when I left Marvel, he hired me to edit Invincible and Walking Dead as well. I sent him the pitch and said, "Hey, here's what we have. I'd like your advice on how to position this for Eric. Is there anything we can do at this stage? The way I'm describing it, is this going to resonate with him? Let me know." And Robert sent it over he loved it and said, "You've got a hit on your hands." And then sent it over to Eric Stevenson, who adored the art. And that's what he emailed me back. He said the art is amazing because I think that's what he looks at primarily. And
Mm.
then said, "Do you have like an
Do you have a
outline?"
story? No.
Well, that's the thing. That's exactly what he said. He's like, "Do you have an outline?" And I sent it to him, and he emailed me back with a contract. He's like, "All right, let's go." And I think
Well,
I think this is an amazing thing about Image, honestly, and it touches on what we were talking about earlier. Is this is a Matt Rosenberg joke, but like it's not the company's not called Word, right? Like
called Image.
what's important about an Image comic is how it looks. They got to look
Yes.
good. And that's
And
been that's been part of the book since the beginning. I mean, the
and
publisher
it
since the
looks
beginning.
absolutely gorgeous. I love it so much. I feel like it stood out to me as unique and original. That's what I think I loved about the comics I grew up with. You were constantly like being introduced to these really new, unique artists that you just really love their styles. And I'm not to knock like digital art and stuff like this. I do a lot of my own digital art, but a lot of the art looks like digitally inked, and this does not look like
Jed's
that at all.
brushwork is
It
lush.
looks
It's
it looks
overwhelmingly lush.
handmade. It looks handcrafted. It looks gorgeous. So I can
Jed's a
see
monster.
why, you know. So you have a good partner in that regard, you know. But speaking of that, it's like, uh, you know, I would definitely get a comic book for the art, even if the story was bad. But I think
I
we
do it all the
should be.
time.
Why can't we have both? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Comics should be written well, and so I'm glad that you're very conscious of that, and
Well,
trying
thank you,
to
brother.
make it happen. And so it seems like it's well received. You got congratulations on your awesome sound. I was going to have it ready and I forgot. I'm so sorry. Your awesome sound bite from Walt Simonson, who
Oh,
I
I
feel like
know. It's new.
he
I know.
summed it up perfectly, what you're trying to do and what the book's about,
It
really.
really means a lot. It really means a lot to have, like, because I mean, especially Howard. Howard's not forthcoming with praise, right? Like, he's a tough guy to please. He's a tough guy to impress. And uh Walt's a guy I don't really know. But his work looms large.
Hmm.
And it's important. And his approach, is very they shared a studio together, him and Howard, and it's and Frank Miller for that matter as well. And their approach to the page, there's a lot of overlap there, and there is a lot that um, you know, I think resonates with what Jed and I are attempting to do with Free Planet. So, outside of the fact that like, oh yeah, well, he's Walt fucking Simonson and
Hmm.
Frog Thor and Orion is I think Orion's better than Thor, but that's a separate podcast, I guess. Well, because you're not a New Gods,
You do have your hot takes, don't you?
You're not a New Gods guy. Oh my God,
Not
Michael,
yet, not yet. The next time we
not yet.
talk,
Next
the
time we
next time
talk,
we
you'll
talk.
read up on all of it. But no, even outside of what he's accomplished as a creator, like his specific approach to the page, Howard and Walt both, the fact that they get and appreciate what we're attempting to do with Free Planet, that they aren't offended by it, really means a lot. It's immense. So thank you.
So I have to throw in this anecdote really quickly about Walt Simonson, just because it's so relevant to comics, and it shook me what he said because because comics, especially back in his heyday, was very much factory. A writer does the plot, the penciler does the art, the inker does the ink, the lettering does the lettering, the coloring does the coloring, and I think he was talking about when he drew X-Men Teen Titans, and he was very conscious of like just having to give it all and give it 100%, because he said at the end of the day, the penciler is the only one who you don't see on the page, because the ink covers the pencils and
Mhm.
erases the guidelines and stuff. So you have to like try extra hard to make as much impact and make your mark and make your
That's so
voice be
interesting.
seen and heard. And it just really, I don't know, affected me profoundly. Like it was such a revelation, but
Yeah,
it
no,
just,
that's a fascinating thing about that style, right? Especially if you're not inking yourself and how a penciler really can easily get lost and all that, especially with digital coloring and everything that can be done in that regard. That's really interesting. I never heard that before.
oh yes. And as a colorist myself, I always mention and give props to the colorist and colorist
Vittorio is amazing.
Vittorio Estone. Gorgeous, looks absolutely beautiful. And is this you, Aubrey Sitterson?
No, no. I'll tell you. So what's funny, Michael, is everybody, a lot of people ask that oh, Grakon is probably based off Aubrey. Actually, when we started working on Free Planet, I had long curly hair down to my waist. So no, if
No,
anything,
no, it's
in
just a
me,
coincidence.
it's me who looks like Grakon.
Oh, okay.
It's not the other way around.
See, you're cosplaying your own character
I
now.
had a beard and long hair. I was full metal guy. I've cleaned up since then.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So I know this isn't a super fair question to ask since the first issue came out, but is this a finite story? Do you already, because it's like, I think, especially when you're planning a series, you might have a direction of where it's going. And sometimes people know the final panel going into it. Where are
Yeah.
you in
Great
your brain?
question. So it's ongoing. We have the first 6 issues done, completely done. I've got them here. So I've been today. Those layouts or those thumbnails I was showing you. I got subsequent issues. I got them all printed out.
Woo-hoo-hoo.
Ow! And then I'm working on issue 7. Those are the ones I was showing you earlier. And actually, no, 7 I finished. 7's done. I'm working on issue 8 now. And Jed's working on 7. The first 6 is an arc. Then the next 6 are part of like a mega arc, right? Like one big story. I know what 13 through 24 will be brought. I know like what the big tentpole stories are, like what the big narrative is, and I have
Mhm.
ideas and lots of notes, believe it, about where all the characters are going. And then I have beyond that, I have even broader top line ideas and then kind of a sense for where it will end up. I don't have individual issues or anything mapped out yet. A really nice thing about everything that we've done about Free Planet, and I think this is true on a macro level as well as on a micro level, right? On the micro, there's so much planning that goes into every single page. I do the thumbnails before I actually script it, and I revise the thumbnails as I'm scripting. Those don't get sent to Jed, but it's reflected in the way that I write the scripts in terms of like talking about formal page layout, which he either follows or improves upon, right? But it always looks different than Thanos because he's better at this shit than I am because he came with Howard. Uh, but in terms of mapping stuff out, and you know, we have because we explored these characters and their kind of foundational philosophical, religious, political beliefs, right, on such a granular, specific level. And I have those dossiers, you know, as I continue to do research, reading, rereading the Spanish Civil War thing. I'm reading a thing about ancient Greek city-states right now too. As I continue to do that stuff, I can just lift things from history and then toss them like a grenade into the Aegis, which is the satellite where the Freedom Guard operates. And I can then figure out how people are going to react. I can figure out where they'll fall on the issue, like what kind of complexities will come out of it. So, for me, there are three components to Free Planet. I think of it like, like a braid, right? And they're braided together. That's not a great metaphor. I take back the braid. There are three components to Free Planet, and maybe somebody can in the
A
comments tell me.
tapestry.
No, so it's more complicated than that. So like, let me explain, and maybe somebody in the comments can tell us what the appropriate metaphor is. But so there's three components. It is the big sci-fi military action. There's the interpersonal drama, right? Because the first, it is a military story. It is a military action story. And the second one, it is a space opera, right? There are all these interpersonal, drama going on. But those two components are driven by and informed by the third component, which is all the big geopolitical maneuvering, right? The interpersonal drama you see is not incidental. The military action you see is not random. It all is derived from this complex, larger political environment, inclusive of economic, inclusive of the religious, inclusive of cultural, right? All of this stuff. And it feeds into these two components such that, for me, the biggest thing is just thinking about, okay, well, what is interesting for Lutheria, the planet, to face? What is an interesting challenge? What is a realistic challenge? What have new independent nations struggled with in the past, in our history? Deciding on that and then how it manifests itself in this broader world that we've created, that's the first thing. But once we've done that, everything else presents itself to us. Everything else arises naturally because we do have this well-developed, complex landscape broadly in terms of these multiple societies and their own individual aims and how these things are playing out, as well as all of these well-developed characters on the satellite who we don't have to scratch our, if we want to have an influx of immigration from some other planet, well, given that, with a little bit more information on the specifics, I could tell you how each person on the satellite would feel about that.
I'm looking forward to, looking at the two-page spread of all the characters. I'm looking forward to like the personal stories and the like history, and because I know all that's coming. It's
Of
like
course.
that was like part of the joy of the book. It's like not only experiencing what like you're seeing before you, but just like realizing the potential for
I
all the
love hearing that.
stories and the characters that I'm excited to get to know. And just based on their looks, it's like you really want to get to know these characters. And I do feel so if you're like, the new Chris Claremont and this is the new X-Men, I'll fucking take it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'll take that
Okay.
comparison. I'm not gonna argue with you.
I mean, who wouldn't want that comparison? I mean, one of the best writers of our generation, one of, but definitely uh, kept me in comics for a long time, for
Oh yeah.
sure. So, do you have any other projects? I mean, obviously, this is so all-consuming. I can imagine you would be
Free
working on
Planet's all
something else.
consuming. Free Planet's all consuming, especially, now that we hit and people
Yeah.
liked it and it did very well. So now we got to do more. We got to keep them coming, which is it's a good problem, right? It's a problem I'm blessed to have, and I'm really excited about it. But I've got ideas, I've got things I'm talking to people about, but nothing even remotely ready to discuss. The focus is on Free Planet right now. The first issue sold out before it went on sale. Sold out the day before. It sold out at the distributor level. And there's no more of them. The first printings, It's just what's in shops. That's all that's left. There's a second printing of the first one coming on June 4th. And then the second issue comes out the week after on June 11th. So everybody will have time if their shop's sold out of the first one, which I've been hearing a lot of from people anecdotally, they'll have some time to read it before the second one hits.
And that must be so, it's like when you do something creatively, you just hope that somebody likes it, anybody likes it. And to be selling out and going to second print must be
It's huge.
so gratifying.
Especially
And
for something brand new.
congratulations.
Especially for something brand new, especially for something so different and so complex. And I know it's not for everybody, right? Like, I mean, like I'm not kidding myself here. Not everybody wants to, some people do just want something to read quickly, and Free Planet's not that. Although I will say that you could flip through and look at the art and you'll get your money's worth because Jed's that good. Uh, right?
I would counterpoint by saying that it might not be for everybody. However, there is something for everyone
For
in
sure. I like to think so. It's a
it.
big book. It's a big book with a lot of stuff going on. And, so especially for something so specific and idiosyncratic and very, hyper honed into Jed and my interests and peculiarities. But even beyond that, to launch a new image book, Jed and I don't have big Marvel and DC ones to our names. We've grounded out doing small press and indie books and Kickstarters and self-publishing stuff to for that kind of long road to pay off is really gratifying. I feel blessed, honestly.
Well, I think, I do believe in fate and things happening when they're meant to. And obviously, you just came up with something brilliant at the right time that hit all the right notes. And, it'll be fun to see where it goes. And I wasn't going to ask this question, but now I have to. It's like, you know, obviously it could easily be, a Netflix series or something like that. Although the budget would
The
have
budget would kill
to,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. I guess that is
This is
the
a
brilliance
comic.
of
This is, I
comic
mean,
books.
like,
You
so
can do whatever you want. So,
that's the proof. That's the proof that this is not a stealth teleplay pitch. This would
right.
be impossible to film. No,
True that, right?
no one filmed this, right? I need, I tell you what I would need, and this would be my dream. Taylor Sheridan would have to like it. It would have to become a Taylor Sheridan TV show, a
Yeah.
soapy Yellowstone style space opera. You don't seem to be as excited about that as I am.
Because I have never seen Tombstone, so
Um, okay.
I'm
Well,
sorry. Because I just didn't know what you were talking about.
that's
I
fine, man.
apologize.
It's fine. It's fine. Nobody's perfect. Watch Yellowstone. It's
Yeah, I
great.
know,
It's
right?
great.
I know if
Honestly, Yellowstone, like, if you're a Claremont, this is ready for another bold claim. If you're a Chris Claremont fan, you'll love Yellowstone.
well, there you go. I
It's
mean, the
it's like imagine Claremont X-Men if it was on a Montana ranch.
yeah.
What's not to like about that?
Of course, I mean, well, that was another beauty of the X-Men. It's like he could have Claremont or and shows what a great writer he was. He could have taken them to a Montana ranch, and
Totally.
we would have been all hog in.
100%. 100%.
So, if nepotism couldn't get you a contract at Image, can it at least get you a Howard Chaykin variant cover or something exciting
Maybe,
like that?
we haven't talked about it because Jed's been doing all the covers.
Yeah.
Right, with rare exception. We had a 1 in 50 that was done by Fico Ossio, who I
Hmm.
co-created. No one left to fight with. He's currently tearing it up at DC. We had a 1 in 50 variant for the first one. And then there's like a retailer exclusive variant that my buddy Buster Moody did. But for like the mainline covers, they're all Jed. And I've enjoyed that because I think he's hand painting them too. They're gorgeous. I think that there's like an integrity to that. It's kind of like a throwback to old sci-fi paperback novels, right? Like these like lushly painted, evocative covers. I love having Jed do the A and B covers each month. It's something I think, you know, kind of sets us apart a little bit. And it provides like a unity of vision, I think.
And also on a creator-owned book, it's like more respectful in a way. You know what I mean? It's like on Superman, who cares? And plus, it's like I always feel bad when the artist kills themselves on the interior, and here comes the cover artist taking all the glory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't have a
So
problem. I don't have a problem with it conceptually or morally or anything. And sometimes I really dig it, right? Because like those examples I was giving, so like, and that's another thing. Like if you look back at like old like Gold Key comics or something, they always had somebody else painting the
Yeah,
cover,
true.
right? Like
True.
either Earl Norem or somebody like Earl Norem. Like people would
Yeah.
be painting these covers, and it was always different. Like look at those old Turok covers. Holy moly. But so I think there's a place for that. But again, like Free Planet's something special for us. I'm gonna drop another name. I'm the worst. But you know what? He gave me a blurb, so obviously I know him. So like I'm not giving anything away here. Jonathan Lethem, the novelist. I was talking to him about comics, and
Hmm.
kind of because I know him from my time at Marvel. He wrote Omega Unknown, which I had the privilege of working on. And I love it. One of my favorite things I've ever worked on. But we were chit-chatting about working with specifically with colors and letters. And I was lamenting the fact, I was like, man, I am worried Vittorio and Taylor Esposito, who's the letterer on Free Planet, and he letters everything I do. I was like, man, I'm worried the guys are gonna quit. I am a nightmare. I am a torture chamber to these poor men. And just, you know, I have thoughts about everything and I communicate them and they're very specific and I know what I want and we have to go back and forth sometimes. And, I'm just such a vicious micromanager. And Jonathan Lethem stops me and says, no, 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 no. You're an auteur. I said, yeah, that sounds better. Let's go with that. I'm an auteur. But that's the thing, man. Like it is a different approach, right? It is this kind of holistic approach. It's me and Jed coming in with this vision, inclusive of design, inclusive of back matter, all of this stuff. It's part of the creative vision. It's this thing that we want to present into the world to exist as an art object. And it's having Jed paint the covers, I think, is a component of that. Honestly, I
Hmm.
think it's indicative of the type of integrity that we want people to know we're approaching to work with.
Well, I like that a lot. And it's
Thanks,
just
man.
good. Like I said, in the review, it shows on every single inch of every single page the thought and care that went into it. Congratulations. I'm
Thank you,
so
brother.
happy for you. It's so awesome. Um, it's I feel like we've covered a lot of good stuff, and I should let you go in a second here, but is there anything else you wait? But I'm so curious. I guess I knew you worked at Marvel, but what did you work on at Marvel?
Oh, a bunch of stuff. I was an assistant editor, and so I assisted on a ton of stuff. I came in when House of M was ongoing, and then I worked on Civil War and Death of Captain America and Old Man Logan. The I worked on some of the Warren Ellis and Adi Granoff Iron Man as an assistant. So I worked in the Marvel Heroes office for Tom Brevoort, and then I worked for Axel a little while too, as books that I edited myself. Blade, with my uncle Howard Chaykin. Marvel Team Up with Robert Kirkman. I did Ant-Man with Robert Kirkman as well. Destroyer Max with Robert. Punisher War Journal. Ghost Rider. That was the Jason Aaron Ghost. So that was like the Fraction Remender Punisher War Journal, and then the Jason Aaron Ghost Rider. I brought Jason on for that, and some like assorted miniseries and stuff. Do you remember the Strange Tales anthology?
Yeah, I do.
I put together the Strange Tales anthology. I left before it came out, so it went through like three editors' hands by the
Yeah.
time it got out. But I
Oh, cool.
started that one. Yeah, man, a ton of stuff. I worked for Brevoort and I worked for Axel, which is a very cool thing in terms of like those are very different dudes and very different editors with very different approaches to comics and the types of work they do. And I learned an immense amount, not just from both, but from the differences between them both
Yeah.
as well.
So are you from New York or?
No, I'm from Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't know why, and I'm sure you've heard this all your life, and maybe you haven't, but when I was thinking about our conversation earlier, I realized your name almost sounds like someone with a Southern accent saying citizen.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. I mean, before I moved to New York, that's how I sounded.
Yeah, like I was thinking, like, like you could like citizen. Like I'm thinking, like what citizen V or like what are
Yeah.
some famous citizens? I don't know, but Anyway, it's a branding opportunity.
Thank you. I'll think on that.
Right.
Keep it up here. I'll mull it over.
Your eventual podcast or
That's
whatever.
right.
So anyway, I so appreciate you talking
This
to
has been
me
great, man.
today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Free Planet is Image's hot new ongoing
Hell yeah.
series
I
that
love
sold
that.
out a couple weeks ago. I know this sounds like hyperbole, but I do want to encourage people just from my own point of view, don't sleep on it. Like get in on the ground floor. It's
Thanks, man.
exciting to get in on the ground floor of a comic, especially with something that is already so lush with so many great things. It's only going to get bigger and more lush and more dense. So I invite
Thank
you
you
to
for that,
just
Michael. And
jump on now and
something we didn't
don't
talk
regret
about.
missing
Yeah, it's something we
it.
didn't talk about too, is that it's designed for the print medium. It's designed for the print periodical medium.
Hmm.
It's something, it's not going to read well digitally. I know it doesn't read well digitally because I had to proof it digitally a million times. And it's terrible. Just all these spreads, all these graphs and charts and maps and lots of text. It's something that you want to hold in your hands and curl up on the couch with one evening and spend some time thinking about it, right? It's not something you flick through on your phone while you're avoiding work. It's some
No,
it's a more
you
serious
just
work than that. And in terms of period, and so I've heard people say, okay, well, I'll just wait for trade. And yeah, you could, but the fact of the matter is these are dense. These are dense books. I think a month, not necessarily reading it over the course of a month, but a month to read it and think about it and wait for the next one, that seems about appropriate to me. It would be a waste, and I think it would go in one ear, out the other, should someone read 6 issues of this in one go.
you know
It's not how it's meant to be read. It's a periodical. It's something that you're meant to read it, and part of the enjoyment of, it's like a good TV show. Good TV shows, I don't binge. I don't binge. Honestly, the rule is if I feel like it's okay to binge it, I should be doing something else. I should be using my time on something more productive. And I pick up a book instead. But like when I watch good TV shows, I space them out because part of enjoying a piece of media is the time you spend with it in your head in between when you consume it. Like that's a component of it. And I hope that people take your advice and get in on the single issues of Free Planet because it's rich, it's complex, it's worth thinking about, it's hopefully worth discussing. And that's why I was so thrilled by your review, Michael. Thank you.
Well, I think that, and I'm glad I did it because I think that I got it and I want everyone else to get
Hell yeah.
it.
Thank you.
All right, Aubrey. Well, hang out just for a second. I'll
Yes,
sign
sir.
off and then we can say a proper goodbye. But so everyone run out and buy Howard Chaykin's nephew's new comic book. I'm just kidding. Run out and buy Aubrey
I'll take it.
Sitterson, Jed Dougherty, and Estoni, or I'm sorry,
Vittorio Estone.
Vittorio Estone's amazing new handcrafted, beautiful, epic sweeping space sci-fi superhero soap opera
Hell
from
yeah.
Image Comics. And I've been saying it, and I totally believe, like, once again, part of the fatalistic is I feel like Image every once in a while has like a resurgence or a renaissance that can be marked by certain things. And so many great books are coming out right now, and you're a huge part of that.
Well,
So
thanks,
one,
man. I got worried because I started seeing all these big books. Dude, Power Fantasy is so good. Power Fantasy launched last year, and Battle Beast just came out. It's so good. We talked about it, Exquisite Corpses. We're taking everyone down with us. Sleep came out this week. New Xander Cannon.
I have all these books in my
It's an
review box.
embarrassment. It's an embarrassment of riches. It's
Yes.
really, really ridiculous. And honestly, knowing about these ahead of time, I really started to worry. I'm like, oh fuck, we're gonna get lost. We're gonna get lost in the midst of all this stuff. So it hasn't happened yet. Knock on wood.
No, I think
Hope
you all elevate each other. It's like if it were bad, then you would be worried, but
that's right.
you're in good company. All right. So anyway, so you heard Aubrey. The second issue of Free Planet comes out June 11th, and the second printing of issue one comes out the week before that. So get on board if you hadn't, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. hit that like button. I'll bring you more soon. And thanks so much for being here today, Aubrey. I so appreciate it.
Thank
I
you for
can't
having
thank you
me,
enough.
brother. This is a treat.
You're welcome. Take care now.